talking on Piers Morgan against Michael Knowles?
Yes.
Yes. So that is a perfect example where if you were to ask Kyle, and he may have even said this actually.
He did a reaction video to it.
Yeah, where he's like, why would I be good faith to someone who is just going to completely only take their side 100% of the time and is not actually interested in the conversation? At this point, the thing I should do is just call them out and let the audience know that they are a grifter, someone who's not actually interested in furthering the country in any kind of positive way, or at least in doing so, never admits when they're wrong.
Yeah.
So that's actually something I've changed my mind on as of like literally within the past month, because I saw somebody reacting to Kyle and I was like, man, I don't know about Michael Knowles that much, so I can't comment on what he's doing with him specifically, but I can see where he's coming from for sure. So
yeah, for sure. I think it's really important to be able to have conversations, to be able to have good faith dialogue, even if you vehemently disagree, and to be able to at least be respectful. And I even think like a part of the Christian framework, a part of the Christian ethic, it doesn't model Jesus to be that blatantly disrespectful or to just talk over people or to dominate kind of the conversation. And so I feel like it's even incompatible, even if you want to take, a super fundamentalist Christian and say, well, I'm defending the faith and I'm, doing this bold, noble thing for, my faith. I still think that it falls short from even the example of Jesus and the teachings of our faith and the way that, we engage in those kind of conversations. And so it's always funny to me to watch people lay the core teachings of Christianity down for the sake of, well, I was in an argument or I was doing this or, and so I think it is very, very interesting. And I do think people who are aggressive as they advocate for positions find that, man, I don't feel like I did a good job in being able to articulate it. It's like, well, yeah, because you talked over everybody the entire time. So I feel like, a lot of times people walk away, and sometimes, especially on the people who are being the aggressive party in a debate or a conversation, a lot of time, that is the win in and of itself of look at how I owned them. I talked over them. I didn't let them get a word out, like all that stuff. So it's weird how people take those things as kind of badges of honor as well. So super interesting.
yeah, I mean, I think the whole badge of honor thing and what is considered as coming on top is a little bit nuanced, because I actually don't necessarily think um I think you could either say that either some aggression is fine or there's a difference between aggressiveness and assertiveness. For example, there's certain things that I'm going to be very passionate about, and there may be even a few times in the conversation that I interrupt. I think the key is just like, can you be passionate, but have the characteristics that show your good faith and you know what you're talking about? So, can you be consistent? Can you be someone who's like actually listening to the other point of view and can summarize it? Because the thing is, if I can summarize someone's point of view and know exactly what it is, I don't think there's anything wrong with being aggressive and assertive and going at it
Oh yeah,
necessarily.
no,
Because
absolutely.
you can be like I think if I understand what you're saying, I can still say, I think what you're saying is really fucking stupid. But there's a huge difference between that and then the other end of it, which is like, well, wait a second. You can't even summarize what I'm saying. So that means you're not even like you're not even critiquing my perspective. You're critiquing what you think is my perspective.
Yeah,
And those are vastly different things. Now,
yeah,
obviously, aside from all that, the goal is always going to be, don't get there. Have a conversation where it's like it can be cordial. But I mean, the reality is that doesn't always happen sometimes. So you have to figure out ways to navigate based on who you're talking to.
yeah,
I mean, this, but just in some of our conversations.
yep,
I think I'm a pretty good faith listener, but also I have no problem speaking up about, what I think the Christian perspective is on gay marriage and how I find that to be absurd.
yeah,
But there's a difference
yeah.
between those types. You understand what I'm saying.
Well,
There's a
there.
difference between good faith assertiveness
Mhm.
and bad faith aggression.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and I think like the you kind of hit it on the head. Like the minute that you begin to articulate what somebody else believes, then you're starting to strawman things. Now, you can naturally in a conversation, you can misinterpret or mishear somebody and need to be checked on it or whatever. Like, but if you are intentionally trying to strawman somebody simply for the sake of, man, my argument, I feel like is better suited if I can kind of lessen, what somebody else is saying. I think that's the other difference as well, because there are times just naturally in conversations where, you don't stop enough to be able to say, wait, am I hearing this correctly? To be able to summarize. And then you end up moving forward and you're like, wait, hold on. Which again, we've modeled that even of like, hey, hold on. That's not what I said. That's not what I meant. Those kind of
yeah, yeah.
things. But again, it all comes back to what's the intentionality behind it, and what are you trying to articulate in those kind of conversations.
Yeah, and a big part of it too, I think that people it's easy to miss is not just that, "Wait, do I understand what you say?" But if you really wanna go further than that, I think this is super important in relationships, especially romantic relationships, but even friendships, really any relationship. Obviously, it's gonna be more important the closer people are to you with
Yeah,
any other
yeah.
relationship, but the idea that, um, not only just take understanding their words and saying, "Do I get you?" but also understanding good intent,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because but my thing with people who I'm close to is always like, "I know you, so if you say something that I find to be insane, my first reaction is going to be, well, that sounds a little insane." But I'm gonna couple it with, like, at the same time, it's gonna be, well, wait a second. I know that this person displays good behavior on a consistent basis.
Mm-hmm.
So first I'm gonna like try to drag that out of them to say, like, are you sure you mean that? Like, here's how it's coming across. Here's what
Mm-hmm.
that means. I can just think of like, I don't know, you could there's probably like a tons of examples we could come up with this, but if I have someone who
Oh,
um oh, your screen just went black. I can't
yeah. I
see you.
think my camera just died. You can keep talking. I'll work on fixing it.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, no, I was just gonna say that I think if you have a situation where, I don't know, say you had some friend who this is kind of a this might be a silly example, but I was just talking to one of my family members about this, so it's on my mind. If you had someone who you knew was really passionate about like animal welfare, and then you found out that like they were vegan, and then you found out that, I don't know, they like somebody told you like, oh my gosh, they had a hamburger or something. It wouldn't be reasonable to assume like, oh, your friend did that on purpose. It's like, well, no, why did they have it? Like, was it they were probably having some kind of like a health issue where they had to eat immediately, or they thought it was some kind of like vegan burger or something. Like, that person wouldn't intend to do that. So your first reaction is going to be, oh my gosh, my friend's a horrible person. Your first reaction is going to be like, well, let me see what's going on here because I know this person isn't like this at the core. So
No, that's exactly it, and it's being able to recognize that. So sorry about my camera, but yeah, it's being able to see, where those inconsistencies are and why they're there, because it might not be that there's a bad argument per se, you know, or that they're being hypocritical or whatever. It might genuinely be something that has a greater explanation to it.
for sure. I will say on the other side of that too, there are, I think, reasons to be suspicious. Like, I don't think there's anything wrong with saying like, observing how people have come up, how they've likely received information, and then approaching the conversation that way. So for me, this would, I mean, we don't have to get into this. This would be like probably a million hour debate if we got into it fully. But for me, that comes up a lot when I'm talking to some Christians because, I mean, it's just, it's, I would just be shocked if this isn't a fact. So I'll just say it as a fact. It's just a fact that there are many Christians who have just been Christians since they were children and they've not done any critical analysis of the text. They haven't done any kind of looking into what like Christian historians say. And so they're just believing what they believe, essentially building upon what they were told as a child and their feelings about the matter. I'm not saying feelings are bad, but feelings can't be the only thing when deciding truth.
Yeah. Yeah.
In fact, it probably should take a back door in a lot of cases.
Yep.
So I just say that to say, I think on one hand, it's definitely true that you have to say, like, oh, I'll take this person in good faith. But on the other hand, there are situations where it's like, I'm taking you in good faith, but I also think you might be blinded to certain things. And I think that's fine too. It's all about a balance. So, when it's an interesting time right now, specifically with politics,
Mm-hmm.
because the obvious critique from some people on the left, like someone like Destiny would probably say, well, I don't watch much anymore, but really I don't watch them. I just come across clips. Maybe
Yep.
occasionally I'll watch a short or something. But he would say something like, I don't really care that all these conservatives are mad at me because you guys he would say, you guys spent years going after like Paul Pelosi or like making fun of that situation. You called
Yep.
Democrats the
That's
worst
exactly
names
it.
in the books. You did all this shit. So it's like, who are you to tell me what I'm doing is wrong? And who are these moderators to be like, well, Destiny, can't you just admit that it's wrong? And he's like, why the fuck would I kowtow to this? Like,
Yeah.
so I mean, it's just a balance. But politically, yeah, I don't know. At some point, I hope we move away from tribalism. What it actually reminds me of? Do you remember how I think we had this conversation? How my feelings on things like TikTok and being raised on social media and all that,
Mm-hmm.
the Gen Z kids that are going through that right now, the hopeful stance is that they realize the negative sides of that.
Yep.
And instead of it getting worse, like some people might predict, it actually gets better because they went through so many negative things. And on the other end of that, they're going to be like, I'm not cheating my children this way.
Yeah.
Hopefully that happens with politics too, where in whatever, and when Trump's gone, whoever comes next, JD Vance, or maybe even before then or a little after then, hopefully there's some point where people come up and they're like, I can't believe we just did this for so long.
Mm-hmm.
Like I genuinely cannot believe that we acted like this, or who's more to blame is a conversation would be open to. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. No, that's a really interesting perspective, and yeah, it's definitely something that we're gonna have to reckon with eventually. I feel like social relationships, just in general, whether you're having conversations or debating things in particular, those kind of conversations have gotten to a spot where it's really toxic and people are just stepping away from them as opposed to actually engaging them because they're too much work. And so I think people are going to have to rediscover um, the value of doing the work to be able to have those kind of conversations again, to be able to fight through, um, to be able to fight through personal feelings, to be able to fight through, the nuanced kind of things, and go, no, we're just gonna have the conversation, and whether that means that it might be awkward for a little bit, then that's fine. So
I actually don't quite agree with that. I
hmm,
think that what's more so the problem is actually opposite. The problem is that people are politically involved more, but they're not involved in a nuanced way. So like well, I shouldn't reveal that information about this friend.
you're good.
So we'll put that to the side. But anyway, God, that would be so bad if I just said it. Just laughing at how bad it would be if I said that. Um,
And then their social security number was.
yeah, yeah. No, but yeah, so I think a bigger problem is actually, and I would, to be fair, this is something that you could probably just look at the data on to
Yeah.
see more or less voters. But if I recall, I thought the Trump election saw, like the last two Trump elections saw more voters per se, like just in general. So anyway, I don't know if that's right, but if that is right, that would, I think, possibly prove what I'm
It
saying.
was definitely more
But
than
again, the issue
2020 for sure.
the issue is that they're so engaged in a manner that I would guess is based way more on emotion than any kind of logical analysis. And
Mm.
again, emotion isn't bad, But when you talk about emotion, it always should be filtered in politics through some kind of lens of logic, right? It just has to be. Otherwise, you're in this state of being uninformed and you got two people yelling at each other who, to be honest, like Trump said about Iran, you got two people that don't know what the fuck they're doing. He said that about Israel and Iran.
Mm-hmm.
But so I think that's more of a problem for me that I would worry about is that the engagement is getting so entwined with I don't know if this is the right word, but almost like hedonistic.
Mm.
Like it's just like want to satisfy my side, satisfy my emotions. And I'm not saying anybody again, some of these people probably mean amazingly well, but
Sorry.
it's you can't analyze politics like that. So hopefully we can move to a place where things are going to be more of a critical analysis because the reality is politicians are a reflection of what the people want
Yeah.
in a system where there's voting. They
Yeah.
just are. And so if you want smarter politicians, then you need to be smarter citizens.
Mm. Yeah.
And that doesn't absolve them of the politicians of their responsibility, of course, but
Mm-hmm.
it's essentially a market. If you display wanting a certain things, the people who have to please that are going to do what they want to please that
Yeah.
or what they have to do to please that. So,
Yeah.
like I said, hopefully that doesn't happen. Um, but we'll see. We'll see. That actually leads me into something else. I was actually talking about a family member with this animal welfare stuff,
Yeah.
and I was telling him, I actually think part of the problem with bigger problems in general are not that people don't care; it's that they care, but either they don't pay attention
Mm.
or they either real or perceived don't have the time for it in their day.
Yeah.
So again, I'll go back to animal welfare just because this is something I'm very passionate about. I genuinely don't think that people don't care about how animals are treated. If
Mm-hmm.
you ask 99% of people, do you think animals should suffer unnecessarily? No, because they understand they have some kind of it appears that they have some kind of conscious experience generally with
Yeah.
chickens,
Yeah.
cows, pigs, that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. But then if you look at people's shopping habits, they don't give a shit. I mean, they just I'd guess they would just pick like the cheapest thing. They don't care how it's raised, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's a result of not caring. I think it's a result of maybe it is to some degree, or if it is, it's a result of not paying attention.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't think you can like know that kind of thing. I don't think you can have knowledge of what some factory farms do and pay attention to that stuff day after day, week after week, and then follow that up with, yeah, but I want to save $3. I don't think rational humans do that. And if they do more than I realize, that's extremely disappointing.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's more sort of a result of I don't think it's a not caring. It's a I'm not paying attention. And to be fair, you can't pay attention to everything.
Yeah.
I always tell people everybody should pick at least 2 things. Doesn't matter what it is. It could be an animal welfare, workers' rights,
Yeah.
something to do with the environment, conservation. There's a million things,
Yeah.
disabilities, mental health, whatever it is. Pick at least 2 things. I guarantee you there's 30 minutes that you're spending on Netflix that you could spend thinking about how to make that better. Like
Mm-hmm.
there just is. And then that can make you feel like you're a part of something bigger than yourself. And this is something we actually probably agree on in different ways. We agree on. I think you kind of have to have something that's bigger than you in order to move you forward.
Yeah.
I don't think you can live a life of hedonism and expect to be genuinely, meaningfully happy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think also too sometimes, specifically with like your example with animal welfare and different things like that. Like there's sometimes where the system that has been created in America actually like you would have to like if you would have to make a decision to like you know become a vegetarian or become a vegan or something. Like there's some things that are just so ingrained into the economic and I, I, yeah, the economy I think is the biggest thing, but so much that is ingrained in the way of life in America that if you truly wanted to make those kind of decisions, it would be almost impossible to find any sort of alternative. We haven't created good alternatives. People feel this way about like clothing brands and clothing stores and different things, and if stuff has been sourced ethically or not, and all of that. But if you really did pay attention, and you really were trying to base all of your purchasing off of which companies are ethical or not, you would not be you would have to handcraft every single thing you make, because everything has some sort of compromise in it. And so I think like even the way that this country is functioning, people with those genuine principles really don't have any other kind of alternative. And I think that's really the sad part, is people are sometimes forced to go against some of the things that they might feel convicted by or might feel passionate about, just because there is no feasible alternative. Like what you were saying, you could pay attention to those things, but it becomes a full-time job just to make sure that every company that you're buying from is doing things according to your ethical or moral standards. It just becomes almost impossible. Now, am I saying that like that means we throw your hands up and you don't do anything, you support anybody no matter what, because you can get into that nihilistic, like it doesn't matter? I'm not saying that at all, but I am saying it is difficult even with some of those things, to be able to actually take the action that's needed to change those things, just because it's so baked into the fabric of the way that we function in America.
Yeah, I mean, I think the issue is that I actually largely agree with a lot of that. So there definitely are like if you were just like born into this world and then you had which like we were, and then like these systems of how meat was produced, clothes were produced. That's
Yeah,
another thing that I'm kind of passionate about too.
yeah,
You're just not like so there's a few aspects of this. First of all, there is a conversation of how much responsibility should you be expected to take
yeah,
for stuff that was like not your fault at all,
yeah,
for systems that already existed
yeah.
and that were at no your fault in there. And that's like, well, you're going to tell me I have to do better, even though I didn't choose any of this.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't start the system. I don't actively, make it the way it is. I just want to have like some nutritious food or whatever it is. I just
Yeah,
want to have clothes or whatever.
yeah,
That's definitely a part of it. I also think there is an aspect, like you were saying, where nope. So nobody can be perfect for sure, but I don't think that that requires as much of a complete. I have to do everything on my own as I think you kind of made it out to be there. So I think you can like. I'll give you an example. I could just tell you what I do, right? So I have not bought clothing, like, probably 80% of the clothing that I've bought over the past 8 years has all been from a thrift store,
mm,
like, every single piece of clothing. That's just not, like, to be blunt about it, that's just not a hard change to make. It's just not. Like, you can do that, And with the animal welfare stuff, am I saying look, I'll even admit, if you go I know a lot about, like, the labels and what they all mean, at least or what they purport to mean. If you go to Whole Foods and you look at their like, so there's this thing called the I think it's like the Global Animal Partnership or something like that, or Animal Welfare Partner, something like that. But if you go to Whole Foods, they have the highest scale is like 5. They have a lot of stuff that's like 4, right? 3 or 4. And I look at that price and I'm like, I bought it a couple times and I was like, brother, I can't sustain this.
yeah,
Like, I just can't do it. I just can't do it.
yeah,
But here's the thing, I can sustain, like I said, there's steps 1 through 5. I can sustain the step 2 chicken. That's something I can do, and I do
yeah,
it all the time.
yeah,
Now, all I'm asking for at minimum is for really everyone to do something like that, like, once a week. Like, that's the minimum I'm at. And I think the problem is people here, like, people won't even do that. They say stuff like, "Oh, well, I can't contribute to the system much. What is my one thing? What is, this isn't fair. Why do any of it?" And I'm like, "Okay, yeah, you don't have to dive in, but probably the next time you want a shirt, you could probably at least try to go to Goodwill first to see if something similar is there."
yeah,
You know what I mean? The next time that, like, you wanna watch Netflix, you probably could spend 30 minutes looking at a donation company that's going to help starving kids in Africa. Like there's something better you can do, but I just don't think people are serious about ethics.
Yeah,
They're just
that's
not
true too.
taught. They're not taught their impact of the world. And the thing is, very similar to how, you're saying like economically, that's just how it is. That's true, but it's economically because the consumer accepts it.
Hmm.
If everyone tomorrow went up to Tyson and was like, hey, I need at least 50 more square feet per chicken in your barns, that shit would fucking happen. Like it might be slow. And if I'm very ignorant on economics. So if I'm
Yeah.
just completely wrong about this, somebody can call me out. But like I think people have more power than they think, first of all. But number two, I also think you're either making decisions that make the world better or you're making the decisions that make the world worse. There is no gray area. Every decision you make either makes things better or it makes things worse.
Hmm.
Now, I think when people hear me say that, they may think like, "Oh, well, you have this like ridiculous moral expectation." No, I don't, because I think you can acknowledge that fact and also acknowledge the responsibility thing at the same time, where you can just say like, yeah, you're right, but also you shouldn't take on full responsibility. And just one more thing, I'll wrap this up.
Hmm.
It's almost like I was talking to somebody about this last night. It's almost like, when I go to the gym, people always say like, don't focus on what other people are doing, but you're just on like a different path. And it's like, yes and no, because when I go to the gym, I can both recognize if I see somebody that's 24 years old, they're unfathomably jacked and they'll just have like worked longer than I have at it because they started when they were 15.
Yeah.
In my head, I'm able to say it's just objectively true that they are ahead of me. Like it just is. If I would have started when they started, I would have been ahead.
Yep.
I can recognize that and also recognize at the same time, equally as important, I'm on my own journey
Yep.
and I can go down my own path. It's the same. I feel like it's the same thing with ethics. You can realize that no matter what you do, you're either doing something good or doing something bad. And you can couple that with understanding, yeah, but I can't take on the full responsibility of the whole damn world without feeling crushed. And
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, you probably shouldn't do that. Enjoy some time for yourself too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Have
Exactly.
some hedonism, like whatever. Like when I go out to eat, if there's nothing to eat, like I'll still get something that's probably not the most ethically produced every once in a while. Like nobody's perfect.
Yeah.
So, but again, the problem is I think people just don't think about it.
Yeah.
I think they just don't think about it and they don't take ethics and philosophy and any of that seriously. You see that with believers, you see that with non-believers, you see
Hmm.
it's everywhere.
Hmm. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. It's certainly a bipartisan and across the board of backgrounds and belief systems. It's especially with social media and kind of the advent of online caricatures. People, it's so much easier to take a stance and put it in your social media bio than it is to actually do anything for it. And so you have a lot of the bare minimum of activism, and people want the pat on the back and the affirmation and the accolades of look at how good I am, when in reality, like nothing is backing that up.
well, okay, so what's really funny about this?
Yeah.
It reminds me of when I was a kid and whenever Lent would come around and you'd have to like give some shit up, I'd be like, "Oh, I'll give up TV." And in the back of my mind, I'm like, "I'm just going to play my PlayStation the whole time." Like I'm trying like it's a very childish way of like, "Oh, I'll
Yeah.
give this up." It's like you're not really giving that up. It's
Yeah.
like what you're doing is you want to feel like you're giving something up without the sacrifice that comes along with it.
Yep.
And it's the ethics work like that too. It's yeah.
We start the year out with just a time of prayer and fasting and different things like that. A lot of churches do either 7 days or 21 days or whatever. And so I was talking to some of the students because we're a big proponent of like especially with students, there's a lot of things within the development of a child and things like that withholding food is not a good idea. And so we're very big on like hey, we're not asking a 15-year-old to fast, especially even with like different things like eating disorders and all of those stuff. Like we are just very, very careful with that. We've actually seen it in few instances, and it's awful because then people attach spirituality to all of these really terrible things. But I say all that to say, talking to some of these students, what I've encouraged is a digital fast, whether that's social media or TV or video games or whatever. And I had a few who took me on and actually was like, yep, I'm going to do that. It'll be really good. And then I had a couple that, like, literally, there was one that was like, yeah, I'm going to give up movies. And I was like, okay, cool. I was still watching TV. I'm like, it's not, that's not the,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
not the same thing. So anyway, it's really funny just how people parse that out. But I think that is how people operate in their ethics and morals all the time.
Well, and with lifestyle changes too. I mean, going back to the gym thing, I think obviously it's more complicated than this, but I think a big part of not succeeding with health changes is that people think, again, this is just kind of a hypothesis, but I feel like sometimes people think that unconsciously, when they think, I want to lose weight and I want to go to the gym, what they really are saying to themselves is, I want to go to the gym and change nothing else about my day and lifestyle. It's like, no, 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 no. You don't understand what this means. Like, I'm not saying you have to start this way, but like, if you really want to go on the full health journey, that means, okay, I want to go lift weights at 6 p.m. right after work.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, what does that mean? Probably you're going to have to pack your lunch. Okay, well, what does that mean? Well, you might need a certain type of food. Oh, well, you never buy that food. Well, that means you're going to have to make sure you buy it when you go to the store.
Yep.
Oh, well, maybe it's like, well, then I want to keep my food cold. It's like, okay, well, then you need to do this because you eat out all the time. Well, now you need to get a lunchbox.
Yep.
And it's like, I don't think people, when you make changes like that, you kind of have to become a new person,
Mm-hmm.
and it doesn't have to be right away. Like if someone came to me and it was just like the stereotypical overweight, they don't eat healthy, they don't do this, they don't do that. Obviously, you would start them off small, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But even then, there's going to be like, look, man, you're just going to have to change who you are to some degree. You're not the guy anymore that goes home and watches Netflix. That's
Yeah.
like you have to change your identity a little
Yeah.
bit. You don't have to change the whole thing, but there's going to be some part of you that's going to feel like this isn't me, and then you have to say it is now. And I'm gonna practice. People always say fake it till you make it. I fucking hate that saying. I've always hated it because it feels deceptive and you're not being real. What I always say is practice who you want to become until you're eventually that person.
Mm-hmm.
So if when you go to the gym and you hate it and you're like, I don't want to be here, it's like, yeah, I get it. You're not a gym goer yet, but you're practicing. It's like before basketball games, you practice the plays,
Yeah.
so you can be the person that can do the play consistently. And then that's you, a part of you. It's
I was
so
listening to a leadership podcast, group of pastors and church leaders and different things, and obviously, faith plays a role in this, but I think it is more of a general thing as well. But there was a father who, he worked and did all this stuff, and he was intentional about taking 5 minutes to kind of switch roles from what he did at work to then coming at home. And that same thing, he didn't always feel like going out and being the dad he needed to be and all this stuff. Like you don't feel that all the time with any role. But he said, the thing that motivated him was, when my kids are 18, when they're out of the house, when they're gone, what kind of memories do I want to look back on? And so again, that same principle of, he was the dad that he wanted to look back on and enjoy being for his kids. And so he's not making the decision for right now, because if you make the decision right now, it's never going to follow through. For him, it was, I'm making this decision because when I look back on these days, I want to look back a certain way. And so you make that decision then, and then you're able to become that person later down the line.
well, and you know what that is too. That's looking beyond yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Right, because that's the family. You're no
Mm-hmm.
longer just you. You're
Mm-hmm.
part of a greater unit. You're part of
Mm-hmm.
a greater system of being
Yeah.
that you want to feel a piece of.
Yeah.
And so that I think that's a big dynamic of that too, and kind of an example of the other things we've talked about.
Yep.
Sort of coming in conjunction. So
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely, man. Yeah, it's interesting, you know, just the way that people have conversations, the way that people navigate those kind of things. It's yeah. Mm-hmm.
For sure. I mean, that's I think that's one thing, you know, talking about kids. I think those are just like fundamentally, I mean, it's going to be more than this, but
Mm-hmm.
fundamentally the two things I want my children to be are thoughtful and kind.
Yeah.
I think if you can be like those two things, I'm sure there's some other characteristics too, right? But those are two like really important ones,
Yeah.
right? If you can be a critical thinker, if you can be intelligent, and if you can whatever you do, do so in service of the world around you,
Mm-hmm.
I think you're I think you're in pretty good shape.
Yeah,
So
for sure. That's good.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. I saw your video
Mm-hmm.
on Josh Hawley.
Mm-hmm.
Uh and I thought that was an interesting video.
Mm-hmm.
Um we've never talked about this, so I'm just curious.
Yeah.
What is your whole stance on the transgender thing?
Uh, as far as in terms of what like what do you mean as far as do I see them as people like that kind of like what it because there's a
Sure,
lot
yeah,
of
I'll be
different
more
ways that could
yeah.
especially with Christians and faith and stuff.
Yeah. No, I'm not saying like, "Oh, yeah, you're a bigot and tell me why you're not." No. Though you might be. I don't know. I haven't heard your perspective yet. You
Yeah,
might
yeah.
be. Uh I think I'm just generally like, how about I'll just do this. I'll just tell you what I think of it, and then
Mm-hmm.
you can maybe I think that'll be a better idea of
Great.
the flow of the conversation because I think, like you said, it's so hard to ask a question about that.
Yeah.
I think there's fundamentally like a few things we can talk about. So I don't think the definition of like man and woman is strictly biological. I think that's like pretty silly. I think that there's a lot of things that like men and women, the way they are, is very much in congruence with um, a sociological aspect rather than just a biological aspect. Now, so I think I understand, you know, when somebody says like, "What is a woman?" and they're like, "I don't know. I can't answer that question." I mean, typically it's someone who has a vagina and breast, but if you saw like, I don't, do you know who Buck Angel is? Have you ever heard of Buck Angel?
Mm-mm.
If you look up Buck Angel, it's just like the most stereotypically masculine person on the planet.
Yeah.
And if you saw them, if you saw this person, I don't know their pronouns. If you saw Buck at a bar and you were like, let's say me and you were at the bar
Yeah.
and it was like, "Hey, I'd like to meet my friend," you would say, I can't remember who said this. There was a similar example. Destiny might have gave it this example, but anyway, you would say like, if you said, "Where's my friend?" or "Where's your friend?" I would not say she's over there, because this person does not look like how women typically just look. And so I think the fact that I would say he's over there, knowing that like I know he doesn't have,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I know he was born with the vagina. I know he was born with the ability to develop breast, but I'm still using he. And I think that indicates that it's not just a biological thing. There's a societal part of it.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, part of the reason that I'm not completely attracted to this perspective on things is because I'm very much focused on individuals and how individuals present and how individuals act in the world. So I think if we start saying things like, "Well, we ought to call this person a woman because women typically act this way," I think you're risking going down a road where we're thinking too much in like in groupthink and sort of putting categorizing people with their immutable characteristics, which are I'm just not generally a fan of. Like when I meet a woman or a man or a gay person or a straight person, I interact with them how they are, not based on how most people of their gender, sex, race, or in general act.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the first part of that. Um, the bathroom thing, I think, is an incredibly huge overreaction. Like, just let people go to the bathroom where they see fit. I mean, you certainly wouldn't want someone who looks like Buck Angel going into the women's restroom with your daughter either, because that is probably more likely to scare a little girl,
Yeah.
seeing someone that like looks like that much of a quote manly man, you know, stereotypically. I will say though, the locker room thing I do think has got to be solved, but that's not just a transgender thing. I'm tired of seeing 80-year-old man's bare ass in the locker room too, and I don't understand why there's not changing rooms.
Yeah.
So then
Yeah.
we don't have to worry about seeing dicks or boobs or anything. We can just like have locker rooms and that can be, and everybody can chill the fuck out. So that's how I feel about that. Here's, I think, the solution to this, and I basically commented this on your video.
Yeah.
I think that biological, we should just call biological women biological women. We should call trans women, biological men, trans men.
Hmm.
That's, I think, the solution. And the reason I think that is because if you want, it is important to know, for example, like medically, what you are, right? So if you are like going into a medical situation, or there are some social situations, I will admit, even as someone who's very focused on the individual,
Yeah.
that your category of personhood, your immutable characteristic, is going to experience that other ones won't.
Yeah.
So this is important because a biological woman is going to face things that a trans woman will not. And a trans woman is going to face things that a biological woman are not. And
Hmm.
same with a trans man and man. So I think actually, for the sake of all categories, it would make the most sense to just have those four terms. That's what I think would make the most sense. And then probably there should be some kind of other pronoun in the future where you could denotate woman, man, trans man, and those be like different. So there could be like a, instead of like he she, it's like he she, but like it has an extra e on both of those, and that's how you know the person is transgender. Like that would be like a really easy solution. It doesn't change the language much, but it's just really simple. Um, so, okay, now the final thing, the lady answering that question. I don't think, first of all, I understand. Okay, let me back up even further. I watched like 5 seconds of it, so I don't really know the whole context of it.
Yeah.
But I can understand someone in that situation not wanting to answer that question if you're afraid of where the other person might go. Because a lot of times what happens is if you just give descriptions and you just continue walking down the line of the questioner, eventually you're going to fall into a trap of like a prescription, which is like how you ought to behave in the world with the facts
Hmm.
that you don't really agree with. So I can understand the urge to be like, well, why are you asking that? I don't understand the purpose of your question.
Hmm.
Now, I think she could have handled that better by just basically saying what I said. She
Hmm.
could have just said, I think biological women exist. I think trans women exist. The question was who can get pregnant? And
Hmm.
if I was in her position, I would have said biological women can get pregnant and trans men can get pregnant. That's what I would have said. I think that would have been an easy way to like dodge the fear that Holly was going to go down this road to eventually like say like, oh, these left wing liberals are taking over, whatever, and they're trying to cut off the penises of our children. Or not that Holly, I don't know if Holly was going to do that or not, but I
Yeah.
understand her fear that he was going to go there. So I know that was long winded,
No, you're
and that
good.
was funny enough my way of asking you a question. So go
No,
ahead.
no, that really does help because let me address the actual hearing in the video first because I did drop that video and
Yeah.
I actually thought about like I don't know if I should just because it was kind of already a little bit late and I've got a couple videos that just didn't happen. Like I actually dropped one on Tom Brady in a discipleship model based off of leadership before the Super Bowl that it was recorded. It didn't premiere, I think, until this week. So it's like, so I was already kind of like, I don't know, not because I'm afraid to answer the question and have the conversation, but just like, I don't know if it's still relevant. However, these things will always, if it's not Josh Hawley and this doctor, it's going to be another conversation somewhere down the line. So I was like, you know what? Let's react to it. I think again, I'm gonna address the video first and the issues that I had. Might recap a little bit of that before I then kind of explain the position on it. The frustrating part that I had was in the video what I said. Why was it so difficult to give that answer? And I kind of talked about it in the video, but basically I was like, if you have something that you do believe in, because clearly she feels a certain way about it, then you should be able to defend that even with bad faith actors, even with questions that might be presumptive and all of these things. And then you address it as it goes down the line, like what you said. Like if you're going down a rabbit trail, then you're able to pump the brakes and stop it. But it doesn't look optically, it doesn't look great when you are dodging a question and you're clearly trying to be calculated in how you answer it. For somebody who's looking at it, that looks like, well, you're just trying to answer it so that you can keep the narrative. And I think Josh Hawley, and I even said this in the video too, Josh Hawley is very good in those settings. If you've watched a lot of Josh Hawley, he is very, very good. He grilled an airline about a year ago on like the way that they were ticketing bags and flagging bags, and basically it was, he was tying it to like bonuses and all this stuff that, I mean, like, but the way he did it like left these airline CEOs like completely dumbfounded. He is very, very good in those settings about asking those kind of questions and being able to do that. So I get the calculation on her end and I understand it. My position is, if you're going to believe what you believe, and even with a bad faith question or whatever, you should still be able to answer it and still be able to at least give the answer to then start the conversation. Pump the brakes later if you need to. And I don't think it looks the best when you're already dodging and trying to like sit there. So that's kind of that video and that recap. You can go back and watch it on my channel and all that stuff. But
Yeah. So real quick, I do want to add a couple things to this that I think are really important
yeah, yeah.
that might change your perspective on this a little. Um, so firstly, I actually agree with you that it looks terrible.
Mm-hmm.
And I think people underestimated, um, I will hedge this as a guess because I actually don't know the data on this, but it wouldn't shock me if people underestimated, like the Democrats really underestimated um, principles of like, trying to think how to say this, fairness for one, and then the second thing would be people's desire to continue doing the things they typically do.
Yeah.
So, like, if you don't come with a nuanced reason why you're going to say that women aren't the only group of people that can't get pregnant, you're going to have a bunch of people that are like, "What the fuck are you talking about? More than women can get pregnant?" And then on top of that, um, like you said, it looks bad when you just can't answer a question. Like that looks bad for sure. But here's the huge caveat to all this. Every single time I've seen one of those hearing meetings, and this is why I think I had as much empathy as I did for her, there is no, like you said, like, oh, when you go down the rabbit hole, you can stop it and explain it there. There's no doing that in those meetings, no matter who is in it. I've seen RFK get grilled. I've seen a bunch of people get grilled. And every time it's like the speaker starts to give, or the answer starts to give an answer, they're immediately like interrupted. So what I could see her fearing is being like, yes. And then Holly's like, well, that's kind of insane, don't you think? And then she says like two more words, and then he interrupts again. And it's like, so in her mind, it's like, I know how these hearing, and I'm going to guess she was briefed on this. And again, I'm not saying what Holly would or
Yeah,
wouldn't
for
done. I
sure.
can't predict it. But I'm guess she was briefed. I'm guessing she was briefed to be like, do not give any answers that's going to lead you down this rabbit hole because you are going to get grilled and you will not find a way out of it. So her strategy was, I'm just not going to even answer this question unless I know exactly why you're answering it or I'm trying to dodge. Again, I'm not saying that's the best strategy. I think
Mm-hmm.
there's a better answer.
Yeah.
But I think that does completely change the dynamic, or ought to change. Um, I think that ought to change like how you're looking at it, because that's how those hearings work.
Yeah.
That rabbit hole thing, like once you go into it, you can't get out of it.
Yeah.
So I didn't mean to cut you off. I just thought that was really important because that detail and that environment in those hearings, there is no like stopping the rabbit hole. Like you've got to have a solid answer.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. No, I definitely understand that. I think getting back to the question and getting back
yeah,
to kind of where we're at with it, I do see it just a little bit differently. I would prefer to be more into what you're talking about as far as like being able to have other categories and different things like that. Now, the obvious thing is like where the authority of Scripture comes in for me, and God's intended design, and all of these things that we've talked about so many times before. And obviously, that's going to influence some of where I'm at. But hopefully, I can try to articulate it in a way that uses Scripture. Obviously, that's going to be a foundation for me, but I think there are some other elements there that are really kind of interesting. So the way I see this whole spectrum and this whole debate is that I see sex, in particular, as a created reality. So I see it as something that's already been determined, already been constructed. It's already there. It's not something that is a self identity. Notice I said sex, not gender, because I do think that there are some differences in that. But I do,
I'm with you on that, by the way.
yeah, yeah.
Sex is like, it just is what it is.
I think anybody who would argue that sex and gender are the same, they're not being serious. They're just trying to make it all muddied and muddled. But I do think that's why I'm trying to keep it to sex, because I do think that builds the framework for where I'm trying to go. I feel like in the same way that sex is a little bit more defined biologically, it's a little bit more defined, it's a little bit more agreed upon as well. There's no outside source. Now, you can talk about gender dysphoria, which I think is a very real thing, and I think it is a very real condition. Is sounds more derogatory than I'm trying to make it, but I believe it is something that is a very real thing. There's a lot of people as well who are in a Christian camp who would like to say that just is not the case, and I think, again, you're being ridiculous. But those people who would discredit gender dysphoria also would discredit any sort of mental conflict at all, and just pray harder and just believe more and just do all that, which I think, again, is super bogus. I think the feelings of gender that are incongruent with sex are real experiences, but I don't think that it's reliable indicators of, again, that created design. So again, basing things off of the framework of Scripture, keeping it to sex, I think that the gender dysphoria and people experiencing things, I think, is a very real thing, and I think is a very real experience that people have. But I think where I would probably disagree is I think it does have to come back to the biological makeup, the sex matching up with the gender. And I don't even think it's not like an actual thing that people can't do. I think, is it the right thing to do? Is it the obviously, if you're going to call yourself a Christian, are you able to go outside of those bounds and sort of create an identity for yourself that's not within the pre-existing created order and how you were made and fashioned? And you could look at Genesis and the created order in 1 and 2 and Adam and Eve, and he made man and woman and all of this stuff, again going back to sex, not necessarily gender. And a lot of people would like to say that Jesus doesn't talk about these things. He reaffirms the created order in Genesis, in Matthew, and then throughout the rest of the New Testament in Romans, 1 Corinthians, 1 Thessalonians. Paul is specifically addressing these things with the churches there as they're navigating some of those things. And again, it doesn't necessarily talk about transgenderism. Okay, I get that. Scripture is not that direct, but it does reject the idea of body and self separation, having a different identity than the identity that you have physically. Those things do have to be congruent. And so a self detached from the body, for me, is not a biblical category. And if the Bible is going to be, a foundation for me, that's where I kind of have sort of the I guess I'm against it in that sense. But I don't think
So
it's, yeah. We can stop there.
yeah,
That's pretty
no,
much
you're
it.
fine. I was just gonna say, do you so what I'm hearing, I was a little confused on what exactly you disagree on, but then I think you got to it. So we probably disagree on then whether or not you should do physical body changes, such as removing your penis or cutting off your breast. So that
Mhm.
would be where we would disagree then, right?
Probably. I mean, like, I don't think that we do anything physically to alter the pre-existing thing of how we were created. I don't think,
Yeah, I just don't
in
know.
other words, I don't think again, if gender is a mental and emotional thing, and sex is going to be physical, I don't think you take the emotions to match the or I don't think you change the physical to match the emotional or the mental.
Okay. I definitely disagree with that.
Yeah, that's yeah, I
Because
get that.
here's the problem. Here's the problem I think with that saying. So first of all, really what this is going to come down to is knowledge of scripture, and what I'm not in a position to. Um, this conversation would be much more interesting if I knew more about details of the Bible.
Hmm.
Firstly, but secondly, I think I would have to prepare more of a moral argument of why scripture shouldn't be the moral foundations. That aside, I don't understand how you can have that perspective without it ending in really weird places,
Okay.
because there's so many things that we can easily do to change our body beyond what they naturally are. Like, and really, there's really kind of silly examples of this where it's like, well, should I never clip my toenails? Because that's changing your body from how it was meant. You're cutting off a piece of it that wouldn't be there otherwise to make you feel better in some cases societally.
Yeah, but you're not
What's the difference?
changing.
So
You're
there's
not.
that.
I
So
don't.
hang on.
Yeah.
There's that. There's also stuff like tattoos. There's also stuff like cutting your hair. There's also stuff like, um, I mean, yeah, I don't know that I don't know where that ends. I don't see
Are
them as that
those?
different because
Yeah. Are those
are they?
changing?
Hang on.
Oh.
I think they're well, obviously the other body parts have way more of a different function, and they are like part of something that is, I think you could argue amongst most people are more serious because of what they function to do. But at the end of the day, it's still a bodily change. So go ahead. What question were you going to ask me?
I don't think it changes the identity. And I think I think that's the marker for me, is that clipping toenails, cutting hair, having tattoos, it's not changing fundamental pieces of your identity that are formed by sex and reproductive organs and different things.
So I'll So I actually I don't quite agree with that. I think that, I mean, the toenail example or the fingernails or whatever are a little different because those often aren't seen. There's not something that people see, but I think a lot of what people identify as with their identity has a lot to do with how they present in general. So like someone having, and this may sound like an exaggeration, but I don't think it is. You see people who have like really long nails,
Mm-hmm.
and that's like part of their like overall personality of being kind of an outside, like, and I mean this in a positive way, like an outside weirdo.
Mm-hmm.
You see people who get, I guarantee you, if you ask somebody that's like fully tatted up, if they would feel like they're the same type of person without those tattoos, I can pretty much guarantee you they would say no. I feel like a completely different type of person. And I can actually prove this because some people get tattoos removed. You don't get tattoos removed if you don't think it's serious. So I don't really see that. Again, we can talk about degrees of seriousness for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But also, I don't think it's so different that it's with the tattoo thing that it's that significant. But also, I'm just not sure why. To me, it just doesn't. Just doesn't matter. Like if you want to like cut off your breast and your penis, if you understand the consequences of that, look, we live in a free society. You can do it. Frankly, I don't care. I just don't care. Um, and then the other side of that is, I don't. I think you're going to have a tough time handling situations where there's a transgender person who has felt that way their entire life. They are super, super depressed and they're on the brink of suicidality. And they just feel like, look, maybe not right now, maybe not instantly, but at some point, I think doing this gender reassignment surgery is going to lead me down a to a better mental health so I don't out myself. I, I, I think you're going to be in a really tough spot of defending that.
Well, I mean, I don't think it's that tough to seek ways and methods and being able to. Now, I'm not into conversion therapy. I'm not saying that. But clearly there's other things that are influencing these things. It's not just a single switch that goes on and off biologically. There are a ton of factors. You know what I mean? that would play into somebody's gender dysphoria, somebody not seeing themselves and not feeling like their body matches who they are. I feel like there are ways to be able to work those things out, to be able to get help, again, not for the thing of like, no, just don't do the gender reassignment surgery. I don't think that's the, I think anybody who makes that the end goal is kind of being insane. But I do think that as people receive help and become healthier, that that you would see that as it's the same way that like anybody who is struggling with any sort of mental health crisis, they're not able to articulate and be able to see reality for what it is. There's something clouding it, and I feel like you have to get people healthy. How many people would then be, if there were therapeutic measures, there were counseling services and different things. How many people, if they felt healthier, would then make that decision to reassign their gender or reassign their sex? I don't know how many would do that. There's and again, you use the tattoo example. I can use that as well to say there are a lot of people who have done that gender sex reassignment surgery and felt like that was the wrong thing, and then they end up with a bunch of regrets in that way. So again, I think though the problem that I have with like using fingernails or using tattoos is it's not changing the basic core identity the way that sex reassignment surgery does.
I can see that more for the nail argument, but I don't. I think the tattoo argument is.
Tattoos
I
are
don't
not
think it's
changing your
nearly the same, but it's
anatomy
close.
though.
It's closer. It's closer than you think. You're not changing your anatomy, but you're still changing something that is significant to the identity. I just I don't
Again,
disagree with you
yeah.
necessarily that somebody who is in a situation, and let's be real about this, Josh. Neither of us don't really know a lot about this. So we're both just kind of like doing our
Well,
best to navigate our way through
being a pastor in
this.
2026, we actually have a lot of resources and a lot of things even within our uh, church fellowship. That there's a woman by the name of Linda Seller who has done her PhD not just in like theology and these kind of things, but actually in gender studies. She's one of those people that Fox News would think are crazy, but she actually has done a lot of research, and it's not just like opinion based, and it's not even just like a bunch of like sermons about this thing. It's a lot of hard data, a lot of really good resources to be able to go to that. So like again, to say that like we don't know a ton about it, I think we know more than I think it I think you know more than you would let on. And I think the same for myself. I'm not an expert in this thing, but I mean I've sat through enough video lectures and read a lot of the data on it. Like a lot of people have questions about this stuff, so it becomes something that I have become, you know, well versed in.
Sure. Yeah, I won't speak for you then. Sorry about that.
No, you're good.
If there's more than you know than I realize, that's fine. Yeah, I'll just leave it at like we're not experts. I just mean that to
Yes,
say that I
I would
think
agree
both
with that.
of our experience is going to be somewhat anecdotal. Maybe you've probably read more of the research more than I have,
Yeah,
directly talking to the that person you're talking to. And again, obviously I would have to look at what you're looking at to have a conversation about that.
for sure.
I think my experience comes a lot from um, I would say just doing one. I work in the mental health field, so
Yes.
this comes up. So that's the first thing. But secondly, like I do a lot of like thinking about this and hearing out different perspectives and trying to
Hmm.
be critical about it. Um, but I do think, again, back to the situation, I don't. Yeah, you're going to have a lot of mental health stuff going on. I don't, you know what? I'm actually even going to go further than where you went. I think there are some situations where, again, this is just a guess, where you have people who say, I am transgender. And then you kind of wonder, like, okay, is that you genuinely having gender, like questions about your gender and matching your biological sex and all that?
Yeah.
Or is this something that's more of a branch of a bigger root? you know, and that it's not your claim to this isn't necessarily 100% this is how it is,
Yeah.
like with the like it's I don't want to say not genuine, but not I don't know how to phrase this, for lack of a better word, not like the root of the problem, I
Yeah.
guess,
Yeah.
a root of the issue. And I do think they're like I've seen people like that where I run into them and I'm like, I understand that you're saying you're transgender, but
Hmm.
I also just have this gut feeling that you have had mental health issues your whole life. And maybe along the way, you kind of heard about being transgender and you said, like, oh, I think I'm transgender, or that's maybe something that you're exploring as part of your mental health struggle overall. So I do think there's a difference. I also think that there are some situations, and just to really caveat what I'm saying with
Hmm.
that last thing, because I got to be careful with how I'm saying that. I'm definitely not saying that like there's some huge preponderance of trans people who aren't like genuinely trans. So if you're listening to
Yeah.
this,
No,
and I'm not talking to you,
yeah, I
if
get
I'm not
you.
talking to you right now, I'm talking to the audience.
Yeah.
If you're listening to this and you think I'm some like, you know, transphobic dipshit, you don't know who the fuck I am or what I'm talking about. So please take me in good faith here. Moving on from that, um, I think there are situations where people can just struggle mental health wise for a long time and they can try all the things that we both agree you should try. Go to therapy, talk out your problems, see what it, and at the end of that, they're still going to be like, I want to transition. And what I'm saying is, I don't have a damn clue if that's going to work out in the end. But I think to say that's wrong or to just say that's a bad idea doesn't make a lot of sense.
Hmm.
I don't see how you can say that or anyone can say that for that matter, because that situation, I guess, probably does happen.
Yeah. Well, and I think there. So first off, I think you can say it's a bad idea. I think you can. I think you can say, hey, based off of what I believe or what I know or what I'm seeing, I think this is a bad idea. Now, here's where I would probably deviate from most Christian pastors and most people even in my camp. Um, if you are above the age of 18 and you live in this country, you can make whatever decision you need to. You can make whatever decision you need to. Now, there's a lot of people who would say that that is me being soft or that's me being like, compromised on my convictions and different things like that. No, no, no. It's the same way of like, man, you can believe whatever you want to believe. Uh, but I still believe that Christianity is the best lived, expression of how we're supposed to walk through life. Um, but you can choose whatever. Like you have the ability to reject this, and I think it's the same way with this. Like you have the ability to reject it. I think that's actually something that we would agree on is like if somebody feels like that's the best decision for them, I don't feel like there should be anything that would prohibit somebody who's of age making a decision. Again, I would like to see it as a last ditch resort. I'd like to see all the other measures and steps be taken. But I do think that if somebody does come to that conclusion and they are in, like they're not, they don't have like caretakers or anybody else who's like making decisions for them medically elsewhere, then I think that you can make that decision. Now, do I think that's a good idea? Absolutely not. Would I like to see that happen with people? No, I wouldn't. And I'm going to do everything that I can to be able to help people navigate through that. But where I would disagree with, a lot of people in Christian camps who would say we need to outlaw it and we need to do this and do all that. Well, no, because I don't think you can make Christian laws based off of some belief system that other people don't subscribe to. But again, I think that actually makes the argument stronger. Is like, is that the best lived experience that somebody can have? I don't believe it is. And I don't believe that you can separate this biological fact of who you are and how you were created. I don't think that you can separate your gender, your lived experiences from that, and then live a, a beneficial like life. I think you'll always be struggling in some regard to that, and that's what I think is the biggest tragedy out of all of it. Is the fact that people can misalign their sex and their gender. And I don't think it ever fixes it because I don't think we were created and designed to separate it like that.
Yeah, I just think that's incredibly presumptive. I mean, I'm sure I'm would be willing to bet there's people that have done that transition and they can directly say, because I've done that transition, I'm living a better life.
Hmm.
And if you measured it in ways that were just essentially objective, you would just agree with them. I mean, there's no the whole thing of like, you were just saying it's a bad idea,
Hmm.
even though that is their last resort. I don't think there's any ground to stand on to say that individual to individual. I think even if you had a statistic that was like, just so you know, 90% of people that I don't know if this is true, I'm just making this up.
Yeah.
90% of people who transition like you want to, they end up reporting living a worse life. Um, I think that's you can say that and you can say you should know that. But at the end of the day, I think this is a decision that is like just very much like, I just am not going to know what's going to make them happy or not. It's such an individualized, subjective experience that I just don't know how anyone can say it is a bad idea.
Hmm.
That's what gets me. It's the same. I tell you what, what this actually reminds me a lot of? This actually reminds me a lot of, well, not it's not a one to one. So the details here aren't important, but what's similar about these two things is the fact that I think it's a bad idea, but I think you can be have happiness. I'm sorry, let me back up. I don't think transitioning is a bad idea.
Yeah.
Here's something that I do think is a bad idea that I would still say, like, at the end of the day, you're going to know what to do better.
Hmm.
Um, maybe the way I would put it is, trying to be careful how I say this.
Hmm.
I think with the transgender thing, I am so absolutely ignorant of what that experience is like that I just do not know how to advise someone on an individual basis. Whereas if you took something like polygamy and someone went up to me and said, "Do you think that's a good idea?" I'd be like, I think that in most cases, you're going to find that not fulfilling. However, not everybody is most cases. So you can try that and do whatever you want. If it's happy and you like it, keep doing it. If you're not happy and you don't like it, then don't keep doing it. But as far as I'm concerned, it's not harming me at all. And so I feel a little similarly about like the transition thing. The difference is I don't know if it's a good idea or not to transition. I don't have enough experience. Whereas with polygamy, I know what it's like to be in a relationship with one person, and I can picture what it's like to be in a relationship with multiple people. I have no idea what it's like for my gender to not match my sex. I just have no clue at all. And so again, I don't see the ground that you're standing on that you think it's a bad idea. That's just, I mean, I guess if you just think like that's not how we're created,
I
but
don't
it's
think.
like,
Yeah, that's exactly it. And it's the objective. It's
but
the
what does that even mean? That's not how we're created. I mean, obviously,
sex
this
is
person
not
was created in
supposed.
part to have this kind of disconnect.
Sex and gender are not created to be separated.
Why?
They are two distinct things because it's the created order that we see in scripture. And this goes back to like, obviously people can say that like, okay, well, scripture's not a good enough foundation. Fine. But that's what I have to go through. And I believe it is the best. And this is why I can say it's a bad idea, because I believe the best outcome is for your sex, the way you were created, to match the mental and emotional and lived experiences that you have. And if that
So
means
would you
and
say
if
that?
that means working through gender dysphoria and being able to like, being able to find freedom from that, then I think you should put the work in and do it.
So if you had the choice between one person doing that for a lifetime and them never being happy but trying genuinely as hard as they could, versus someone who did transition after considering every other mental health factor, and then they reported an overall better life
Hmm.
satisfaction than the first person, which one would you choose?
I would choose the first.
Okay,
I
yeah.
would,
It's
yeah,
I don't want to live.
because
I
here's
don't
the
want to live in a world where that makes sense
well,
because it's just not.
here's the
It's
reason.
just it doesn't make any sense to me.
Here's the reason. Again, going back to the teachings of Jesus in Matthew, he says it's better for your hand to be chopped off than for your whole body to go into eternal fire and hell and all this stuff. I believe that if you detach your gender from your sex in this way, I believe I still believe in redemption. I still believe that, you know, people can come to Jesus even post conversion. And there's even some theories about like, well, what does somebody do if they've, you know, already transitioned, but then they find Jesus at a later date or whatever, and all this stuff. It's like, man, I really don't even know that. But I would rather somebody struggle through trying. And again, it goes back to what I've said before, where if somebody has a genuine desire to follow Jesus, I think that's the other marker too. Because I feel like if you don't and you want to go do whatever you want to go do, like I believe that like this is gonna sound really, really crass, but like you're gonna go to hell either way. And so like if you would rather be happier doing it that way than if you don't follow Jesus, I believe that that is the eternal uh, uh, I believe that's the fate, right? And so like if that's your thing and you're like, well, I don't want to follow Jesus and I don't want to be a part of this and I don't want to do this, then yeah, go, because it really doesn't it doesn't matter, and I'm not really going to be able to convince anybody if they've made that determination. But if there's somebody who has gender dysphoria, is thinking about having a sex operation, but then they want to then follow Jesus, I think yes, you should be humble enough to say, man, this is a struggle and I'm going to fight through it, but I'm going to really honor the Lord in it. That's what I would rather see for somebody who wants to follow Jesus. I don't think that you can transition. I don't think that you can live a trans lifestyle and then claim Christianity, claim faith, do all those things. So
Okay. So I'm not really sure what a trans lifestyle means because so many trans people are different. But secondly, I
living a trans experience, I don't. You knew what that
what's a
meant.
trans lifestyle?
You
You
knew
think
what that
every
meant,
trans
to
person lives
live
the
as a
same
trans
lifestyle?
person.
I didn't know what you meant. That's why I asked. That's like saying a gay lifestyle or a straight lifestyle. It's not
Yeah,
a life like a lifestyle is like a conglomeration of like 70 million different things that
it's
you
more
interact with
general than
daily.
that.
What?
If somebody has it, like if somebody's like, well, I'm an outdoorsy person, that could mean 700 different things. That was weird to me that.
Do you think the experience of outdoorsy is like the same category as saying like transgender or gay? Outdoorsy is it's very much implying that you are outdoors a lot.
Yes,
If
I
someone
was
tells
saying
me they're
to live
gay,
an
if someone
experience
tells
as
me
a.
if someone tells me they're gay or transgender,
Mm-hmm.
all that tells me is that they're gay or transgender. I have
Yes.
no idea what else they're doing with their life. They
Yeah,
could be a
no, of course. I'm
ballerina,
not
they could be
boiling
into
it just
basketball.
down to that. Of course not.
That's that's what it sounds like.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's honestly not
Yeah,
the most important thing that I wanted to even mention
for sure.
anyway. Uh, I think that frankly, I just think that you're if the whole world looked how you just laid it out there, I think there would just be an immense amount of suffering amongst tons of people. I think trans people would suffer. I think gay people would suffer. I just think so many people would suffer because they're going after this thing in this path of Jesus that like they just are not. That it's just not. There's some things that people just are the way they are. You're not going to get it out of them. You're not going to go down some path towards some hypothetical, God that exists. And I think that I would much rather focus on making the life we live right now as good as we can while also balancing that with like good ethics, helping other people, all that kind of stuff,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to hoping that, of something that we have just objectively less evidence of existing in the afterlife.
Hmm.
And so, yeah, I just think, frankly, that you're dooming people to a life of suffering, and yeah, you're basically
Yeah.
the fact that you would choose the first person in that example, I think is crazy.
Well,
I
again,
think
like I
that
said, if
that
somebody wants to follow
that's not what's important.
Jesus, I think that there is a certain level of sacrifice and self-suffering that you have to exhibit. Again, that's
I
why I'm
think
very
I
careful
think
with saying that, because I feel
yeah.
like somebody who doesn't want to follow Jesus, go do whatever you want to do. It
Yeah,
doesn't
but then
change.
you
It
also
doesn't.
just said you said they're gonna go to hell anyway, so
Yeah, if you
you're not
don't
just
follow
making
Jesus,
yeah, I understand.
it doesn't matter if
You're
you have a
you're
sex
not
change or not.
but you're not just making a statement of like everybody has freedom, do whatever you want. You're also coupling it with this moral statement,
Yeah,
which is that you can do whatever you want. Oh, but also you'll go to hell
yeah.
if you do this certain thing.
There's a consequence for that. Yeah,
Well, then what's the point of saying you can do whatever you want? That's boring. Everybody knows you can do whatever you want. Like that's stupid.
Why?
What's the
I'm
point of
confused.
even bringing that up? What's the
Because
point of
people have
bringing
a
up?
conscious decision to make on if they believe this thing or not.
Yes, that's like everything ever.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like obvious. What's really matters is like what should be the consequence of your action? What should be what comes out of the decisions that you make? And we're disagreeing
Yeah, I
here
just
is
laid
that
it
I
out.
think someone yeah, I know. If someone wants to transition, but
Mm-hmm.
okay, if someone wants to transition, then and they're in that spot and they've gone through all the medical stuff and they want to transition, and your answer is like, no, you should still fight it your entire life, even though that you could theoretically live a better life here on Earth. That's just insane to me. Like I don't. It's just insane. It's going to get a lot into like the whole scripture and all that stuff.
Yeah.
I think the bigger problem you're going to run into is I don't know how you decide what scripture is better between your scripture and another scripture because you don't have a solid foundation of like human suffering. Your foundation is just like, well, the scripture says so because God laid it out this way, Jesus laid it out this way. It's in difference of Jesus' teaching. But I mean, this is going to just go down like a huge, like a few huge rabbit holes, and
And we've already
the
had the
fundamental
conversation. Yeah, we've already had the
the
conversation about suffering and the fall and all that stuff.
I mean, we have to some degree, but I think it's I don't think it's been completely fleshed out.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's way more to it.
Yeah.
Because frankly, I just think the morality of avoid suffering as much as possible, maximize well being is just going to be way better than anything any religion ever lays out.
Mm-hmm.
It just will. It always. I think that's been the truth for all of humanity, and I think it will be the truth for all of humanity going forward. Now,
But
there's going to
you
be some
just,
complications there.
but
There's going to be more or less. It's not. It doesn't have anything to do with hedonism. It doesn't have anything to do with, well, you just decide what's good and you just decide what's not good. No, we can have moral standards. We can agree that there are certain things that every single human being experiences,
based
which
in
is
what?
close to saying it's objective. And then we can go morality from there. I mean, if you want to start at the basis with this, if here's like a really easy example to start with, okay? If you think murder is wrong, I'm sorry, if you think no, I'll put it this way. No person who isn't psychologically ill thinks murder is right. And so what that says is every single psychologically functioning person believes that murder is wrong. And we all know that because we all can experience what that would feel like, what it would feel like to watch our loved ones go past that, yada, yada, yada. That's the most common thing. Every human has that common experience, and we know it's true. I think morality is way better grounded than that, than some, than having God as like the objective moral lawgiver, because God, by definition of being God, is disconnected with us and our experiences. We cannot experience what's in God's mind. We can't. So the best thing, and we don't even know for sure if God exists. No matter how much faith you have, you do not know that God exists. So it makes more sense to ground it on something that we know exists, which is human suffering in the present. And you just the problem with other religions too is there's no end. Like having God in this doesn't solve the problem. For some reason, people think that when you say, well, we need an objective moral lawgiver, otherwise ethics would be subjective. And I just think like, how does God solve that problem? Because then I can just ignore what God thinks. And then it's still subjective. So like there's no getting out of the subjectivity of morality. So you might as well ground it in something that we all
No,
experience as
it's
humans
not
on a daily
getting
basis.
it's not getting rid of the objectivity. It's just making a declaration that says I will subject myself to that or I won't.
Right. That would be subjective.
It doesn't mean that okay. It doesn't mean that it's not still capital T truth.
There is no capital T true with
There is.
morality because there. Okay, let me explain this real quick. Would rocks exist if humans didn't exist?
I have no idea.
Okay, I'm going to ask this again, and you're going to be serious about it. Would
No,
rocks exist if humans didn't exist?
I have no idea.
Okay, I I'm a little dumbfounded that you're not answering this question. Rocks exist objectively, right? They are here.
Yes.
If every human died, would that same rock still be there?
Yes,
Okay. If
that's a
every
better phrase.
human died,
Hmm.
if every human died, would human morality exist?
The constructs or the practice?
Both.
I think I think the constructs would still exist. I think the truth is for all time, whether somebody's there to practice it or not.
Okay, so that's where yeah, we definitely disagree with that.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
don't think this,
No.
and this is something that Alex O'Connor and I both agree on, um, and I think I actually came to this before coming to him, but it was interesting to see he agrees with me on this.
Hmm.
Morality is not the type of thing that can be objectively true. When humans stop existing, rocks still exist. When humans die, human moral systems don't exist.
The implementation don't. Yeah.
Well, I don't think they exist at all. You can't have human morality without humans.
Hmm. Yeah, I would disagree.
Okay. Well, I think I have way more evidence for that than you do.
Yep.
But I mean, again, this is just going to be a scripture reliability thing. I think the big problem is I don't see how you're going to say, like, if someone comes to you and they say, well, stealing is wrong, because if you go to someone, I'll take you in the good faith example in
Yeah,
this
yeah.
one. If you go to steal and then you say, well, I don't steal because that's against God. And then somebody else steals and they say, well, I do steal because my God says it's okay to steal in this situation.
Hmm.
How do you resolve that?
If somebody says that their God allows them to steal,
Or God in general. You say God says I should steal, and they say no. I'm actually interpreting something differently. I think you should steal.
then we have. Well, it depends. Is it the same God? Because if it's not, then it's a lowercase g and it doesn't exist.
Sure, same God. Two
Sa-
Christian interpretations.
yes, there we go. Then you have to go back to the scripture and actually uncover what it really means, and then there is an objective truth that comes out of that.
What if you disagree on what the objective truth is?
Then it would become subjective, and there would be somebody who's right and somebody who's wrong, somebody who has a correct interpretation and somebody who has a false interpretation.
Okay, so what would you then? You're at that point. How do you decide which interpretation makes sense and or would be best to implement in the world?
Well, you look back at the totality of scripture to figure out if it's congruent with the rest of things that you see in scripture. You look at the initial context, the immediate audience, and what they would have interpreted that to be. And then you take the truths that are universally trying to convey themselves and pull that part out.
Okay. Um. Again, it's just going to keep asking the same question. What happens
Yeah.
if you disagree with those things?
Again, I think that you develop a theology that is false. You develop a theology that is not based in the true meaning of what the author originally intended to write, what the Holy Spirit inspired them to write. You miss out on the truths and you work out with some really whack theological positions. That's how you
Yeah.
end up with really
Um.
bad. That's how you end up with really bad theology and fringe people on, Christian fundamentalism, Christian nationalism, Christian progressivism. Like you have all these really weird things that are distortions of scripture or straight up omissions. There's a lot of that too, where people will build a theology based on one or two verses and it's not actually what was being written.
Yeah. So you've I think the problem here really simply is just that there's no way to determine which one is right or wrong. It's all going to be interpretation at the end of the day.
I just laid it
And
out.
so you didn't just lay it out. At the
I
end of the day,
did.
all of those can just come back to I don't agree with you. That's why there's different sects of churches, of different sects of Christianity, is because they don't all agree on the same thing. And so the point I'm trying to make here is that it doesn't solve the problem for morality. And the only way to get out of it, I think the best way to get out of this, if you're in your position or any other religious person's position, is to say, well, I'm going to look at what causes the most harm and causes the least amount of harm, which is fine. But then you're back to what I think.
Hmm. Yeah, I don't agree because I feel like the sects that you have of Christianity still agree on the main tenets. of the faith. I think any sort of differences that you see are expressions or secondary issues that actually don't matter in the long run. My moral and ethical framework as a Christian, a Pentecostal Assemblies of God Christian, is more similar to a Baptist Christian, more similar to even a Presbyterian Christian than, a Jehovah's Witness or a Mormon or, somebody else. So, like, even if we have differences in kind of the expression or the outward thing or how things are supposed to function, you still have the same moral and ethical framework that you find agreement in. That's why you can have ecumenical events across denominational backgrounds still actually fall into agreement on main
Sure.
core tenets.
I understand what you're saying. I still think you would fall in the same issue though with different religions though, because they're all going to say like, this isn't what God. This is what God thinks. This is what God. I mean, Christianity and Judaism and
Mm-hmm.
Islam
Mm-hmm.
all have major differences of what God thinks. And I think at the end of the day, you're just going to run into an interpretation problem, whereas that everybody has different interpretations, and there's just no solid grounding for it. Because again, I think a lot of this stuff, when it comes to morality, it's all subjective. That doesn't mean it's arbitrary. I just think it's subjective.
Mm-hmm.
And even if there was one God who was like, I am the moral lawgiver, so what? Why do I have to listen to you?
Yeah, totally.
Well, that would make it subjective, though. And I
That's
just think
no, it's
I'd
not.
rather
It's not that it's
I'd rather
subjective. It's that you are rejecting, you know. And thank God that we have free will to be able to do that. It would suck to live in a society where you're forced to live a certain lifestyle. There's actually a lot of people who would like to see that happen. I am not one of them. They would like to see, Sabbath requirements and commerce slowed on Sundays and all of these things that I don't agree with. They would like to establish a national religion. They would like to do all of these things that I don't agree with. I am thankful that you have the ability to look at the truth of God's word, to look at the person of Jesus, to look at Yahweh, not just a God, but Yahweh, and to be able to say, I reject it, because all throughout Scripture there were people who did that, and there are consequences for doing that. But in this life, if that's really what you're focused on and that's really what you're banking on, then go do that. Like that,
well, yeah, I mean,
that's
it's not about just banking on it though. It's just the fact that like again, in the same way that someone could argue like I hear this all the time, right? They say like okay, well you care about human suffering and well-being. Well, who's to say that that matters? It's like okay, I guess I think it's kind of by definition it matters. That's like saying why is bad bad? It's like it just is. And so, but I think the
then
in
who
the same
established?
way,
But here's my thing:
I
is like
think
who
the same.
established it?
Well, just real quick. I
Yeah,
think in
yeah.
the same way, I think it's the same. You're basically doing the same thing with God. If you're just saying like, well, that it just is what it is. It is the moral lawgiver. So it's like we're having two things that we think like just is. And so what it comes down to me is like, well, what is the only thing I can base my answer on is what I know and what I experience. And so the best thing to do that would be the human suffering around me, because I know that humans suffer and experience well-being in very similar ways that I do.
Yeah.
And I think that is way more foundational than it's like, again, if there's a moral lawgiver, I understand I can do whatever I want, but I'm talking about the specific attribute of God existing does not imply that we ought to listen. Because God says something and then lays out consequences if we don't listen to him, doesn't mean it was right. It means he said something and had power and implemented it. It doesn't mean that his implementation or what he wanted was good at all. You have to base what's good on something entirely different than existence.
I would agree. That's God is outside of existence in the way that we would think of it.
Okay, well, okay, my answer doesn't. Fine, we have that caveat. My answer doesn't change.
Yeah, absolutely. Well,
Well, do you understand the difference though? It's not just like a matter of like I'm not just this isn't just like me about saying like I'm going to choose to disobey God. It's me saying like no, there literally is logically no logical connection between existence of a God and listening to it. Therefore, there's no capital T truth there.
yeah, and you get to make that decision. It
I
doesn't.
understand.
Yeah.
That's part of the conversation is just so boring though. I understand I get to make the decision.
Mm-hmm.
Who cares? what I'm saying next is, like, I'm not trying to be rude, but it's like,
No, no,
we
no,
just
no.
keep coming back to this
But
because,
that's
like,
the
I just, like,
beauty.
it doesn't matter.
That's the beauty of capital G, God, Yahweh, and other false religions, is that other false religions would have the world look a certain way and take dominion over things. And there's even people who believe that as Christians. And again, I think it speaks to the very nature of God that you can come to those conclusions to say he's not somebody that I would want to serve. He's not somebody that I want to agree with. I don't want to listen to anything that he has to say. I think that is the beauty of, yeah.
I understand. I'm saying the capital T truth thing,
Mm-hmm.
what I'm trying to talk about.
Yes.
The capital T truth thing, you think it's capital T true that there are morality that's objective and
Yeah.
basically it's God's morality.
Yep.
And what I'm saying is that logically doesn't make sense because
Okay.
just because God exists does not imply that his morality laid out is capital T true. In the same way that there is no capital T true that suffering, quote unquote, like matters in some way that's like eternal and grand and forever. No, it's subjective to human experience, but it's still like that is the most important thing we have is our experience and our ability to relate to each other. And when we get away from that and try to have some outside moral standard,
Mm-hmm.
then we're really not showing as much empathy towards each other as we ought to. And we get clouded with scripture as opposed to being clouded or not clouded and supposed to being influenced by what we know to be true about human suffering and human well-being.
Mm-hmm.
And so again, just to go back to the main point, the capital T truth thing, it does not like it, it the fact I'm trying to think how to say this.
Yeah.
There just is no connection between God existing, therefore his morality is the capital T truth. It's just there's no logical connection there. You just believe that, which is if you believe that, fair enough. I'm not saying you don't have a right to believe it, but you just believe it.
Hmm.
That's why it's subjective. You just believe it.
Hmm. Yeah, I don't think so because I think he lays it out.
Of course you think so,
Yeah.
because you think so.
Yeah.
But there's no way to verify that. You can't verify that. And this is why I brought up the rock. The rock exists. It just is there.
Yeah.
The morality thing does not there's no connection between like his existence and the morality. You then have to filter it with I think this is true. You don't have to do that with mine. There's like no person who isn't psychologically ill has to like think it's true that suffering matters. It suffering by definition matters.
By definition.
Yes.
Who's creating the definition? Is it based off of a human experience?
Yes, of course.
Great. That has built the moral framework. Mine is not based off of merely human experience.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
But what you're saying is yours is capital T true.
Yeah, yours is so temporal. That's the thing. Is like it only exists if humans exist. It only exists as long as we follow it and live by it. That's not.
I didn't say as long as I didn't say as long as we follow it and live by it. That's not what I said. I
Well,
said
you
as long
said
as we
you
exist.
said that there were some things by definition should be true. So that's what that would mean, correct or no?
Assuming we're alive to experience it, yes.
Yeah, I would say that it would exist whether we were in existence or not.
Yeah, I'm not getting an answer on how, like, again, God's existence makes it so that his morality given is capital T true. And just because, even if, let's say, honestly, Josh, let's say you're right. Let's say
Mm-hmm.
humans do die. We all go to an afterlife. Okay, we're there. That my problems still exist. Just because that happens doesn't mean that his way of saying is capital T true.
I think it's by his very nature and the fact that he spoke everything into existence that creates,
which is what you believe, but
Yeah.
it's not by definition true. It doesn't exist in the way the rock exists.
I love that you keep coming back to the rock because I also believe that the rock was created by God anyway. So like,
what does that have to do with anything?
well, I think it's evidence of the. So I think it's evidence that God exists outside of what I just believe or don't believe. I think That's what I'm saying is like even in that example, the rock is the proven existence of God creating things, even if there's no
Okay,
humanity.
I'm just gonna grant you all of that, okay?
Yeah.
God exists, he created the rock, he created us.
Yes.
Now I want you to tell me why I should believe his morality is the best morality. Because
Because
these are completely different
he's
things.
the one who gets to dictate what it is because of the authority that he has.
Okay. That is just something okay, let me
Dude, if you
he
create
gets
a Lego set,
so
you get to tell me what the Lego set is.
yes, but I don't get to tell you what the Lego set ought to be.
Yeah, you do. Yes, you
No,
do,
you
because
don't.
you're the owner, you're the creator. You're the person behind it engineering it.
Okay, so that means that again, it's just like an assertive statement, but there's no connection. He owns us. He owns the
That's the
creation.
connection. The ownership and
Therefore,
the
yeah, I
that is
understand.
yeah.
I understand what you're saying.
Yes.
He created it. Therefore, he has the authority to dictate the morality.
Yes.
Okay. If you owned a business, does that dictate how you ought to treat your employees?
Yes. Yes. You get to dictate.
Really? There's not some
Yes.
outside. There's not a
No.
moral standard.
No.
There's not.
You're the
Are
business
you?
owner. Now, here's the and I love this analogy
Good.
because it fits perfectly.
Go ahead.
It fits perfectly is you then have the ability to say I subscribe to this company and I don't, and then you can move on. It doesn't mean that the company is like you get to create the framework.
Sure.
Absolutely. You get to create it.
Do you think it would be morally right if the owner paid their workers $4 an hour?
Mm, I think they get to determine what. Yeah,
That's not
yes.
what I asked.
Okay, yeah, sure, yes. If that's if it's a yes or no, then yes. I think they get to
You
determine.
don't believe that. You
Yes,
don't believe that for a second. No, you don't,
yes,
because I
because
know.
then you have
No,
the
because
ability to say,
I
"Hey, this is
know
not
you're
for
more
me."
strict about labor. I know you're more strict about labor rights. I know for a fact you are progressive on this. That if a business owner came out and said, "Fuck you guys, we're going to pay you absolute minimum wage, and we don't give a shit of no worker standards, no workers' rights." No shot you
Dude,
would tell them they have the right to do that to their employees.
okay, so listen, my first job. I'm so glad that you brought this up. My first job, I worked for a family-owned restaurant.
Okay.
16 years old. They broke every
Uh-huh.
child labor law. I was working till 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning by myself, washing dishes by hand, all of these things.
Okay.
That business
You're
still
pivoting, I think.
function. That business still functions, and they get to do whatever they want to do. It doesn't make it. It doesn't mean that it's the right thing in my thing. But you know what I did? I go, this isn't for
There it
me.
is. There it is. You just said it. You just said it. You said you don't think it's the right thing.
Yes,
So
I'm now gonna move.
the existence of it does not give it authority
Yes,
to perform certain things. It
yes,
doesn't. That's
it
why we
does.
have laws.
No,
That's why
but
we have labor laws.
but
Why do we have labor laws then?
well,
Because
clearly,
it's saying
clearly,
even if you
people.
own a business,
Yes,
it's saying even if you own a business,
yes.
you can't do whatever you want to your employees.
Well,
And
clearly
so
they
what I'm
can.
saying that, huh?
Clearly they can, because that happened
They
for like
can.
6 months.
You know what I mean. You cannot legally do it without going against some greater moral standard. And so what I'm saying is there is no connection between I own something, I created something, and the morality of that thing just being objectively true or objectively something to follow or it having objective authority. Even if God created the universe and he claims to have authority,
Uh-huh.
I can just say, hey, there's no logical connection between those things. There just isn't, man. There's no logical connection between I created the universe.
Well, just
Therefore, I get to dictate what the laws.
well,
I get to dictate the laws.
but like I said, that business still functions. I don't know if they still do what they do.
You're looking at one business.
I then made the choice to say I don't want to subject myself to this anymore.
No shit.
But that
I'm
business
saying-
still functions the same way. They're still in operation. They're still doing all the stuff they're doing. That's what
sure,
I'm saying.
They've
They've determined how they want that business to operate. Doesn't mean that it's bad or not. You know what I'm saying? Like they still
wait. So then, wait. So okay, you just said it doesn't mean it's bad or not. So then, if God created the universe and lays out a morality, it doesn't mean that it's bad or good. It just means that he's claimed the morality.
Okay.
He's saying, I have the authority, therefore I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
So there is no connection between creating the universe and saying, now you have to listen to me.
Hmm.
We have created a society. The broadly speaking, the signers of the Declaration of Independence,
Yes.
the writers of the Constitution, created our society. It has morphed based on what humans have needed over time.
Mhm.
That's why, if you're a constitutional textualist, I think you're probably a fucking idiot, because you cannot be a constitutional textualist and say, like, apply it. I don't know if this is even a good example, but like, Thomas Jefferson didn't have social media. Like, so we have to rethink how we're going to do social media laws, even though we have this basis. So again, just because something or someone creates something does not give them the moral authority over that thing. The moral authority ought to be determined by what the
Yeah.
experience of the collective
Yeah.
in the society believe, and then that is the thing we strive towards.
Well, honestly, and this is going to be absolutely ridiculous, but if there was a way that the original authors were able to come back and revisit all of those things, they would then have the authority to change all of what they wrote over anybody else. That's what I would believe. And I know we're getting into like some weird, wacky, like sci-fi stuff, but if like he came back and was like, "No, I actually meant this," or "I actually want to see it this way," he would have the ability to do that as the author. And again, that's like I said, like that's why I use the Lego analogy.
Yeah, but it's not. But what does the authorship serve? He would have the ability to change what he wrote, but he wouldn't have the ability to change the law. That would have to be decided by the collection of society and how they currently feel about it as an elected representative. It's not. He doesn't just get to like. He can say, "Yeah, I wrote what I changed," but he doesn't get to say, "Now you're going to follow it." And I think that's because, and the reason
clearly,
I mean,
like clearly God doesn't do that with us.
Right.
Clearly, God doesn't do that with us because, like, people, He's not smiting people for not following Him.
You just told me earlier that if I don't follow Jesus, I go to hell.
Yes.
You just said that.
Yes.
That is like the definition of having a consequence for not following Him. That basically is smiting. I would rather be struck by lightning once than suffer in eternity in hell. Listen, I think. Listen, I don't say this very often, but I think you understand fully what I'm saying. That just because something created something does not mean there's a capital T truth between what it believes. That is what I agree that yes. I agree that you think that, but that is just, I don't know, there's no connection there. You can think that, but there's no logical connection. It's like, you might as well say, I don't even know. I'm just trying to think of something like equally as insane. Like, because I'm a man, I must want to visit Mars. Like, there's two things have no connection. Like, they just don't connect. You're making that face of like, that doesn't make sense.
No, yeah.
Exactly. It's not supposed to make sense. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense to say, look, if I met God right now and he was like, and he said, I exist, therefore I have the authority over all of this stuff. I would just be like, prove it. And he wouldn't be able to prove it because proof doesn't exist. You cannot prove that your moral way of being, your proposals are right simply by your existence, simply by you creating something. It doesn't make sense. It's never made sense. If I created a Sims world and the Sims world was conscious, and then I said like, the rule is you have to do, you have to starve yourself all day. That's just the rule. That's what I think is morally right. The Sims characters would have to be like, that doesn't make any fucking sense because I'm starving and that sucks and I'm suffering. And then I'd be like, yeah, you know what? You're right. Because the fact that I created you has nothing to do with what's right or wrong. I think the reason this matters is because I think at the end of the day, it's still subjective.
Yeah.
That's why it matters. Well, because you just believe it.
I agree with what you're saying. And I agree that there is an element that I just believe it. I think the same about you, that you just believe it. I don't see the connections either. And so I do think that we're just taking our belief systems and supporting them in the same ways.
And I think mine has way more evidence of existing though. That's the big thing. I think mine is like definitionally true, where yours you have to make a
Who's
connection.
creating the definitions?
Every non-psychologically ill experience gives the definition.
Okay.
It's not created.
No, that's great because I've never been able to actually understand how somebody can build a moral framework without some sort of actual root. So it's good to know that that's the root. I think it's valid,
Yeah.
but I do think it falls short.
Okay. I just
Yeah,
don't think I don't
exactly.
think it
No,
falls
I'm
short.
with you. I'm with you. I have fun with it, and I am
Why do
genuine
you think it falls short? Why do you think it falls short?
because
Sorry to cut you off.
it's merely based off of human experience.
Okay. See, when you say merely, that makes it sound like less than, but I don't
Well,
think
it's
it's
just
merely.
I think
I think that's like the max of what we have. That's
yeah.
all we that is all we know for sure.
Yes. Yes,
Exactly.
I would agree with
So
that.
that is the thing that our morality should be based on, is the thing
I
we
don't
know
agree.
for
I think
sure.
there is more to it than just our experiences and just what we
I
know
think
now.
I understand that, but
That's where we would disagree on it.
yeah, but there's no the issue is, even you have to admit, Josh, there's more evidence for human suffering than there is an existence of a God.
Maybe. Like I would
Hmm?
I mean like maybe.
I
I
mean, that's just, it's by definition. I mean, you have faith, right? You have faith because you don't
Yes,
see
but
an
then there are
experience in the same way
but
that you would suffering.
you're discrediting so many of the different typographies. You're looking at um, uh, discoveries in archaeology. You're looking at the fact that the translations do correlate so well across a span of 3,000 years and 40 authors and all of, you know what I mean? Like I do think that there are glimpses and evidences to be able to see certain things. And so I don't think it's merely faith. I think the faith is informed by some of the discoveries. I don't think I have the clearest picture, and I don't think that I will ever have a clearer picture than you would like to have or defend, because I do think that as it stands today, February 20th, 2026, I think that you're correct that you would have more evidence to point to say
Hmm?
this thing is correct. I would
Yeah.
even give
So
you that. But I'm think but where I go to is I think that there is enough evidence even without a clearer picture to then have a certain level of faith to then say, yeah, I believe this thing is true.
okay, so I'm just going to blatantly disagree with this.
Yeah.
We should never put a hypothetical truth over a certain truth.
Yeah. Yeah, we would disagree for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, that's just,
But I
I don't see why you would
understand.
have to do.
Like I get it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep. I think one of these times we're going to have some kind of conversation or debate on the historical reliability of the New Testament, because that is something I have been listening to all kinds of videos on that
Yeah.
and have been hearing all kinds of things. And I think it's great. I've been listening to some of the other side too. Let's
Yeah.
see. Let's talk to people on the list too. Bart Ehrman. I'm sure you know him.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Dan McClellan.
Oh,
He-
dude. Oh
he's a,
no.
oh, you're not a Dan McClellan fan?
Dan sucks, dude.
Dan sucks. All right. Well, that'll make. I'll just ask. Can you give me like a one sentence synopsis of why you think he sucks? He's a little sassier than I would be, but
I think that I think he cherry picks in his exegesis and his conclusions from what he studies. I think his
gotcha.
theological
Well,
perspective is wrong.
okay. So
I know he knows a lot. He's very well studied. I would never disagree with that.
the people I'm listening to lately have been Bart, Dan, um, listen to a little bit of Wes Huff,
Wes
Peter
Huff is
J.
great.
Williams.
Wes Huff is great.
Um, I wish he would debate Alex O'Connor.
That would be interesting.
Who's the other guy? The guy that Bart Ehrman debated on Unbelievable, Justin something. And then Bart also debated William Lane Craig, who he's pretty famous.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, so it's definitely been a topic I've been interested in. But yeah, we're definitely gonna have to
Yeah,
get
that
get
would
into
be
that
really
at
cool.
some point.